Oh, what a humane person he is. He stayed in Burma and became a monk. Japanese movie Burmese Harp. The movie The Burmese Harp was made twice, in 1956 and 1985. I think young people will ask what country is Burma. Some people may say that, but they are referring to current Myanmar. It is a politically unstable country that continues to be ruled by a military government. By the way, 1956 is just 11 years after the end of the war. I was born in 1946. So I was 11 years old and in the 5th grade of elementary school. The first Nikkatsu movie, Black and White, featured Shoji Yasui as the main character, Private First Class Mizushima, and Rentaro Mikuni as a group leader. The second movie, Color, starred Kiichi Nakai as Mizushima and Koji Ishizaka as a group leader. This is an anti-war movie that captures the hearts of those who watch it, as it depicts the horrors of war in the spirit of Private First Class Mizushima, who decides to remain in Burma to repose the souls of the soldiers who died in the battle. After watching it, I was left with such a humane and ethical impression that it still remains vivid in my memory. I have never seen a movie about war that left such an impression on me. Everyone, please watch it at least once to learn about what World War II meant to Japan and the world, and how wars between Ukraine and Russia, Hamas and Israel are currently occurring again, and what humanity has learned from past history. It also teaches us that we have not learned anything. The original author of this novel was Michio Takayama, and The Burmese Harp was serialized as a children's novel. March 1942, 80 years ago. At the beginning of the Pacific War, the Japanese army, which had been victorious, invaded Rangoon, present-day Yangon, Myanmar, and occupied Burma, which had been colonized by Britain. However, with the defeat at the Battle of Midway, the situation quickly turned around, and it became increasingly likely that they would be defeated. In order to take revenge, the Imphal operation was called the "most foolhardy" operation in the Pacific War, in which they invaded Imphal, India, on foot, across a 470-kilometer mountainous region. This was because the then Chief of Staff fought with reckless tactics of simply pushing forward without any plan. I will not go into more detail as I will run out of time. But during the invasion of Burma, the soldiers who survived the Imphal campaign engaged in gun battles with the British Army across the Irrawaddy River over the next year. It is said that 167,000 Japanese soldiers died. It is said that such a large number of dead people fell down one by one on the road, giving it the name White Bone Road. The number of deaths is also expressed in the movie, but it seems that the Japan were completely unable to cope with the number of soldiers and planes fighting with British from the beginning. The British military commander at the time said, "The fundamental flaw in the Japanese military leadership was a lack of moral courage. They did not have the courage to admit that they had made a mistake." The film centers on Private First Class Mizushima, who decides to become a Burmese monk during the war with Britain. Let's get started. July 1945. At this time, near the end of the war, the Japanese army was having a tough time in Burma, and a unit led by group leader Inoue, Rentaro Makuni, was attempting to cross the mountain range on the border. Leader Inoue had graduated from a music school, and when his members got tired, he would encourage them to sing. The accompaniment at that time is Private First Class Mizushima, Shoji Yasui, who plays the harp, and before he knows it, Mizushima has become an expert on the harp. Mizushima also used the harp when he went on reconnaissance missions, allowing him to alert his men of safety or danger. Music was very important to this group. One day, the hungry soldiers receive hospitality in a certain village. However, when the villagers begin to sing a song to thank them for their welcome, they disappear all at once. Before they know it, the village is surrounded by British troops, and leader Inoue orders them to sing a song to catch the enemy off guard. The soldiers secretly prepare themselves while singing and prepare for battle. The explosives box that had been left in the center of the plaza was reassured because the enemy was distracted by the music, and they were able to pull it out. The British soldiers who were watching the scene began to sing "home. Sweet home," in English. The members are confused, but Mizushima responds by playing his harp. Both armies sang "home. Sweet home," in chorus and communicated their hearts. That night, Inoue's troops learned that a ceasefire had been concluded 3 days ago, and they lay down their weapons. As I watched this movie, I was moved by the immense power of music. This was possible because there was a song that was sung in unison by both enemy and ally during the war. This song is a British folk song that has been translated into Japanese and is a song that most people know. The meaning of "home, sweet home," means that it is a home built in the style of shabby, but it seems to be the most calming place, and it was the perfect song to soothe the hearts of the soldiers of both countries during the war. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of feeling a sense of peace when listening to or singing music, or a heart filled with melancholy that reminds you of your hometown. During the same World War II, there was a time when about 150 Japanese soldiers were imprisoned in the city of Muntinlupa in the Philippines. However, there was someone who saved the soldier who was gradually sentenced to death and was destined to die. A monk named Sayunin Kagayo, who was staying in Japan, was sent to Muntinlupa on the orders of the GHQ, referring to the Allied forces that were at war with Japan, including the United States, France, and Great Britain. He was sent to serve as a spiritual leader for the soldiers, and he had 2 Japanese soldiers compose a song that sang the sad hearts of the soldiers who had been drawn out to war. And he adapted it from the Japanese popular songs of the time. Hamako Watanabe, a singer, came to Muntinlupa to listen to the song for the soldiers. Apparently, all the soldiers cried. So, Mr. Kagayo apparently asked Mr. Quirino, the president of the Philippines at the time, to play this song. Mr. Quirino apparently decided to release everyone, even though his wife and his brother were killed by Japanese soldiers. This is a historical truth. In this way, music has the great power to change people's hearts and bring peace to their hearts. Japan surrendered. Captain Inoue encourages his team members, saying, "We don't know what the future holds, but if he can go back to Japan, We'll go home with every single one of them. Inoue's unit was sent to Mudan POW camp, approximately 30 kilometers southwest of Myanmar. Captain Inoue hears that the Japanese soldiers barricaded at Mt. Senkukuyama won't surrender no matter what, so he sends Mizushima to try to persuade them. After Mizushima finishes his mission, he will follow his unit to Mount Senkukuyama. The British Army gave Mizushima just 30 minutes and called off the attack. Mizushima hurries to a cave on the cliff and demands the captain of the barricaded unit to surrender. But the captain refuses to yield, and in the end, Mizushima is also caught up in the British attack. Even though the war had ended, the few Japanese soldiers holed up in the mountains did not rejoice at the end of the war, but instead tried to follow the military's orders to fight to the death. The same goes for the Special Attack Squad. There was a time when it was considered a virtue to always carry out a decision even if it was wrong. And this was the case with the Tokyo Olympics that were forced to take place in 2021. Author Ryu Hanma called the government's stance on forcing the Olympics to be held as Operation Imphal. And it was the same spirit. How can we have such stupid leaders? It has been 80 years since the end of the war, but time has passed and the top government has learned nothing from history. As mentioned above, the words of a British military commander at the time clearly express this problem. It's a lack of moral courage. If you need to retreat, just retreat. This happened as a result of the thoughts of the Japanese Army's commander-in-chief being thoroughly communicated to each and every Japanese soldier. When Mizushima woke up, all the Japanese soldiers had collapsed. If they believed Mizushima and surrendered or were taken prisoner, the war would have ended. So the Japanese soldiers who could have avoided death but chose to die can only be called foolish. Mizushima crawls out of the cave and falls down the cliff. Captain Inoue, who had arrived at Mudan camp, was worried that Mizushima had not arrived even after 10 days. He asks an old woman, Tanie Kitabayashi, who comes to barter to ask her if there are any Japanese soldiers who were injured at Mount Senkukuyama at the hospital, but the old woman is unreliable. One day, the Inoue team was repairing a bridge when they passed a monk who looked exactly like Mizushima on the bridge. The members all shout out Mizushima, but the monk turns away from him and walks away. A parakeet was perched on the monk's shoulder. The old woman had gotten information that Mizushima was probably dead. There was a parakeet belonging to the monk and his brother's parakeet at the old woman's house. So Captain Inoue asked for the parakeet in exchange for the watch. Mizushima's hope for survival disappears, and Captain Inoue deeply regrets his decision to send Mizushima to Mount Senkukuyama. However, Mizushima was alive. That day, Mizushima, who had collapsed at the bottom of a cliff, was saved by a monk and received treatment at a temple. Mizushima, now feeling better, disguises himself as a monk and heads for Mudan to avoid his danger. If he goes to Mudan, he can meet the members. However, Mizushima sees piles of corpses of Japanese soldiers everywhere on the way to Mudan. The bodies were left out in the open, unburied, with flies clinging to them and birds eating their flesh, leaving them to rot in pitiful conditions. Mizushima turned his attention away and ran away, crossing the river and entering Mudan, where he found many corpses of Japanese soldiers on the riverbank. Mizushima, who stayed at a temple near the POW camp, is excited about seeing everyone tomorrow. Early the next morning, Mizushima meets a boy playing "home." Sweet Home, on a lyre. The boy listens to Mizushima's performance, and asks Mizushima to teach him how to play the lyre, which Mizushima readily agrees to. There, Mizushima sees British people burying Japanese soldiers who died in the hospital. They built graves and sang hymns for unknown Japanese soldiers. Mizushima is shocked by their compassion, and he remembers the many corpses he has seen. After Mizushima is conflicted, he decides to return the way he came. Then, on the bridge, he passed his friends from Inoue's unit. Mizushima begins burying the bodies on the riverbank by himself, and soon the locals begin to help as well, and the graves of the Japanese soldiers are built. One day, Mizushima finds a large Burmese ruby in the dirt. The locals say, "It must be the soul of a dead person," and Mizushima takes the ruby home with great care. Captain Inoue, who was working on building a temporary ossuary in the temple, heard a boy playing "Home, Sweet Home," in the same way as Mizushima. Furthermore, on the day of the memorial service for the British soldiers, we see a lone monk holding a wooden box. It turned out to be a monk who looked exactly like Mizushima, whom he had passed by on the bridge. Captain Inoue wants to somehow confirm whether he is Mizushima or not, so he begins teaching the parakeet the words, "Hey, Mizushima. Let's go back to Japan together." The Captain Inoue wanted that monk to be Mizushima, so he was trying to find evidence that it was Mizushima. Captain Inoue was planning to put this parakeet on the monk's shoulder and make it talk if he met the monk. He tells his soldiers that if the monk remains silent even after hearing his words, he will give up too. On his way back from Mount Sakakayama, Mizushima saw many rotting corpses, and although the war was over, he must have wondered day and night about whether he should return to Japan with his soldiers. Mizushima had hidden the ruby in a wooden box he had left in his ossuary. Mizushima comes to pick it up, sees Captain Inoue come in, and hides in the shadows. The Captain Inoue finds a wooden box and says to himself, "How painful must it have been for Mizushima," and when he sees a ruby inside the wooden box, he leaves the ossuary. Mizushima, who was in the shadows, burst into tears when he heard the captain's words. That's because he knew that the captain understood Mizushima's heart. Like anyone, when someone you respect understands how you feel, you're bound to be so happy that you cry. At this time, I thought that the souls of the Japanese soldiers who had passed away remained in this ruby. And I had decided to remain in Burma with this ruby forever and offer a memorial service to the souls of the Japanese soldiers. Believing that ruby is the soul of a Japanese soldier, Mizushima goes to bury it inside a large statue of Nirvana. Coincidentally, Inoue's team begins to sing in front of the statue of Nirvana. Hearing the nostalgic voices of his friends, Mizushima can no longer resist and starts playing the harp. When the members heard the sound, they loudly called for Mizushima. However, he was scolded by the guards and had no choice but to return to camp. Mizushima tearfully sees off his friends. Now, it has been decided that he will return to Japan in 3 days. Captain Inoue entrusts the parakeet to Old Lady with the words, "If you ever meet a priest who has his brother's parakeet, please hand over this parakeet." The friends continue to sing in the campgrounds, thinking that it might reach Mizushima. Finally, it was the day before they return home. Finally, a monk appears in front of the camp with 2 parakeets on his shoulders. This scene left me with a lot of tension, wondering what would happen from now on. Will Mizushima decide to return to Japan with everyone, or will he remain in Burma as a memorial service for the souls of the Japanese soldiers? I couldn't hide my feelings. I'm sure everyone, including the captain, was hoping that Mizushima would return to Japan. One of them was a parakeet given to me by old lady. Everyone started singing Hanyu no Yado to the monk. At that time, it was unclear whether the monk was Mizushima or not, so the soldiers were singing in a panic. The way Akira Nishimura, Jun Hamamura, and others who played the members of the group sang the song, half convinced that it was actually Mizushima, really touched my heart, and I was moved by the beauty of their acting. The monk took the harp that the boy was playing and played the harp, which was exactly Mizushima's style of playing. At that moment, the members all burst out in unison. The members were convinced that the monk was Mizushima. It was a truly wonderful moment to see the expressions of surprise and joy displayed by the members. It was the happiest moment for both Mizushima and the members. And I burst into tears as I felt the happiness of the actors who had tasted such a happy moment. What an ending! The singing voices became louder, and you could tell from the movements of the members that Mizushima was very happy to be able to return to Japan with everyone else. Everyone shouts, "Let's go home together," and asks what's wrong, but Mizushima doesn't say anything and starts playing "When I look up, I will honor my masters." This song is sung at graduation ceremonies at most schools in Japan and begins with a message of gratitude to my teachers. I cry just sing or listen to this song. This song so moving that you can hear sobs among the students singing it at school graduation ceremonies. Just listening to it made me feel I am getting old before I could repay the kindness I had received from others. I can't help but burst into tears because I instantly feel the meaning of the gratitude I have received, something I will never forget, no matter how much time passes. By playing this song here, Mizushima must have been expressing his gratitude to the soldiers who helped him on the battlefield. All the members must have felt the same way. Mizushima was crying. Everyone is listening silently. After the performance, Mizushima bows deeply and leaves the venue. Everyone frantically called out to Mizushima, but Mizushima wouldn't turn around. This scene is the best scene of the movie. Human beings have beautiful emotions that cannot be expressed in words. This final farewell scene is filled with beautiful human emotions. It is a feeling that cannot really be expressed in words. Although Mizushima's feelings about why he decided to stay in Burma and why he didn't return to Japan with everyone may have been conveyed to the captain, the rest of his comrades may not have been informed. However, Mizushima didn't say anything, just silently thanked him and left. Mizushima must have wanted to convey his true feelings to each and every one of them. However, Mizushima must have made a big decision in his heart that no amount of persuasion would change his mind. His true feelings were that he might have been lucky enough to escape death and return to Japan, but the Japanese and British soldiers who lost their lives could not return to their homeland. He must have wondered whether it was the right choice for him to leave behind the Japanese soldiers who had died in such a tragic manner and return to his homeland. He must have decided to stay in Burma to pray for the souls of as many soldiers who lost their lives as possible. The day of returning home, the old woman brought Mizushima's parakeet and a letter. Captain Inoue reads Mizushima's letter aloud on the ship. Mizushima officially became a Burmese monk, and he set himself the mission of burying all the corpses of his compatriots scattered in the foreign land. Captain Inoue is at a loss for words, thinking about Mizushima's feelings. Who would have wanted to return to Japan with him? The parakeet in Mizushima cried out, "Oh, I can't go home after all." It was a truly moving movie. That's why we shouldn't go to war. Let's all countries around the world abandon their nuclear weapons, throw away their weapons, and join hands to create a peaceful world right now.